Well, you've been looking for Noah's Ark for a long time. Uh, Tell me what convinced you that this is the site of Noah's Ark.
There's a couple of reasons. Number one, it's in the general area that the Bible says it's landed. As we mentioned earlier, the book of Genesis and Genesis 8:4 says that Noah's Ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. There's only one verse in the Bible that says where it landed. Moses didn't give us the GPS coordinates. So all we know is that it's in this ancient kingdom. And this area where we're standing here in eastern Turkey is part of that ancient kingdom. And so it's in the right location. Number two, it's the right length of the boat. And so those who say it's a natural formation, you still have to deal with then, well, how did this natural formation get exactly 300 cubits that's mentioned in the book of Genesis?
So Andrew, first of all, I guess, is it Durupinar? How do you pronounce that?
Yeah, Durupinar.
Durupinar. Okay.
Yes.
And how close is that to Mount Ararat? Pretty close, right?
Yeah, we are. I could turn the camera on. I'm looking at the mountain right now, and it is 20 miles away. There it is.
Wow, Mount Ararat.
Yeah. So this area, according to the Bible, the ark landed in the mountains of Ararat, and so that was Ararat was the name of the ancient kingdom here, and the kingdom of Ararat was called Urartu back then. And so that would be like saying today the ark landed in the mountains of Colorado. You know, it's a larger area. So the Bible wasn't, Moses, when he wrote Genesis, was not saying this a very specific peak. All he said was the ark landed in the mountainous region of this kingdom called Ararat or Urartu. And so this site is within that ancient kingdom's territory. You have the archaeological remains of this kingdom all around here, castles, settlements. So yeah. Amazing. But the big stratovolcano Ararat, it's a big composite volcano. It's just right across the valley from the site.
Okay. Well, tell me what we're looking at here in the background.
Yeah, okay, so I am standing on a hill that overlooks what's called the Durupinar site. This boat formation was first discovered in 1959 by Captain Durupinar. He was a Turkish army captain working in the mapping division for the Turkish government. Their pilots had photographed eastern Turkey high up, 50,000 feet altitude to map out their country. And so while he was studying these maps, it was September 11, 1959, he discovered this boat formation. And he was so excited. Within a week, it made the news. And within a month, it was around the world in the press. And so the original photograph showed this very distinct boat formation sitting in this mud flow that goes up. Right over there is Iran. Like that cliff right there is the border with Iran. So it comes all the way down this mud flow from the border and goes to the valley. And so Captain Durupinar showed the press the information. In June 1960, the next summer, an American team came out here with the Turkish military and Captain Durupinar, and they investigated the site. And now one person on the team was very positive. He said, there's no way in nature you can get this boat formation. The rest were still skeptical. They saw mud and dirt. And so the site was published, though, in September 5th, 1960 in Life magazine. And so that's where a lot of Americans back then heard about it because of that publication about their expedition. And then it kind of died down until the 80s when Ron Wyatt, another American, came out here. He was an explorer from Tennessee, and he started his own research from 1977 until he passed away in the 1990s. And he was kind of the main guy promoting the site back in the 80s. And then that got the Turkish government interested. So where I'm standing right now, there's actually a visitor center that they built in 1987 due to Ron and others' efforts in investigating the site. And so what we're trying to do now is further that research along with the Turkish team that we are using, that we are partnered with today.
Mm. Well, you've been looking for Noah's Ark for a long time. Tell me what convinced you that this is the site of Noah's Ark.
There's a couple of reasons. Number one, it's in the general area that the Bible says it's landed. As we mentioned earlier, the book of Genesis and Genesis 8:4 says that Noah's Ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. There's only one verse in the Bible that says where it landed. Moses didn't give us the GPS coordinates. So all we know is that it's in this ancient kingdom. And this area where we're standing here in eastern Turkey is part of that ancient kingdom. And so it's in the right location. Number two, it's the right length of the boat. And so those who say it's a natural formation, you still have to deal with then, well, how did this natural formation get exactly 300 cubits that's mentioned in the book of Genesis? Moses writing with an education from ancient Egypt, he used the Royal Egyptian cubit most likely, and that was the standard of measurement like the metric system is today. And so this Royal Egyptian cubit, when you do the math, it comes out to be 515 feet long, and that's exactly the length of this boat formation. And so you can say that's a coincidence. Well, that's to me, that's one of the extraordinary proofs that this site is most likely the burial or the decayed remains of Noah's Ark, is because you have the ship shape in the mountains of Ararat at the exact length. Now, in the middle of the boat, it has splayed out. As it decayed, the timbers fell apart. And so you do have it, it's a little wider than the 50 cubits given in the Bible. So in the middle, the widest point is 138 feet. But from our scans that people have done over the years, we are seeing 3 different layers below the ground. And so in the biblical account, it talks about 3 decks. And so there are unique characteristics of this site that should get people, thinking like, well, if this was natural, how do you get a ship shape with distinct layers and patterns below the ground only within the shape of the ship? And so if this was a natural object, you think it'd just be random rubble, a rock and dirt. And you're not saying that with the geophysical scans that they've done over the years with ground penetrating radar, with electrical resistivity, the ERT scans. And so we hope to continue that this year with the Turkish scientists.
Right. So that's one thing I wanted to ask you. You did the scans. What is next in the process of determining, Noah's Ark, whether this is Noah's Ark? What is the next process?
Well, so there were scans done for the Science Channel back in 2019, and that actually hit the press just a couple of days ago, actually, the results from those scans. But the Turkish government, they would like to get their own official results. So they're going to actually do 2 different types of scans with radar coming up this month. And so they're looking at, there's different types of frequencies that you can scan in the ground, and they penetrate at different depths, and they give you different resolutions. And so they use the different antennas to kind of focus in the ground, depending on the soil type. So with this soil, they're looking at using a 500 megahertz antenna and a 250. So basically what that means is that they're going to get really high resolution, 2 to 3 to 4 meters down. And then they'll get also deeper scans to see what they can find, more into the ground. And so they need to get their own data. So that's what they're going to start this month on. So besides ground penetrating radar, they're going to use also 3D seismic, which uses audio waves. Like sometimes when they do it, they pound on a device into the ground, and then those shock waves or those audio waves goes to the soil, and the software then can interpret that and make a 3D shape out of what they are seeing in the ground, depending on how it returns back to the computer system. And so 3D seismic is one thing they would like to do. And then the other one is, again, ERT, which was done in 2014. But that was done by a private individual, John Larson from New Zealand. And his results were spectacular. They actually showed the shape of a hull below the ground there. But again, it was not official Turkish government scientists working out here through their universities. And so when we ask if we could excavate the site, under their permits and with their supervision, they basically said, well, first, we would like to get our own geophysical data. So this is the scans. They would like to get their own scans done. Second, they want to core the site. So these are, it's a geological tool, but they also use it in archaeology, and it drills like 3 to 4 inch core samples into the ground, and then they pull out the material and they can analyze all the layers. And so they would like to get that, because then you can compare those layers to what you're seeing on the radar scans. So like we're talking about, we're seeing right angles below the ground, we're seeing parallel lines. Well, we can core down into that and pull out the samples without doing a big expensive excavation yet. And so that's one way to preserve the site. It's very fragile. So then after that, they said we could do pursue excavations after the core drilling is finished.
Okay. Tell me how the Turkish archaeologists got involved. Before, I understood that they didn't want anyone coming in and doing anything on it, but now we've got them involved. Can you talk about that process?
Yeah, when we first approached them, the initial people we talked to were skeptical. They're like, let's leave it alone. It's a tourist site right now. There's a visitor center. People can take their photographs. And they gave a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is they're like, if we were to excavate, what if it's not Noah's Ark? That destroys the tourism potential. They're thinking dollars. So it's a legitimate concern right now. If you don't believe it's Noah's Ark, but you're making money off of it, let's keep it the way it is.
Yeah.
But for me, because I believe the scans are showing it's a man-made object, and if the shape of a ship and it's in the mountains of Ararat, what other ship would be out here?
Right.
So I'm more positive, obviously. And so when we started showing them our scans, the private scans that were done in 2014 and 2019, that actually got them more interested. And they're like, oh, well, maybe we could duplicate these results. Because in the past, a lot of the scientists you talk to, they're either evolutionists here or they believe it's on another mountain because of the Quran saying it landed on Mount Judy. And there's a traditional Mount Judy about 200 miles south of here. And so in their mind, well, this is a Christian site and Judy would be the Muslim site. And so you do have some politics and religious issues involved. But, God has opened the doors for us to continue this work and work with individuals who are interested, who are Turkish, scientists and professors of archaeology. And so we're excited and walking through the open doors.
Definitely. Can you talk about any challenges that you've had to deal with in doing this?
I think the biggest thing is just getting people interested. Most people, you talk about Noah's Ark and they kind of their eyes glaze over, especially if you talk to a scientist. And so that was the challenge. It took a couple of years to actually find some individuals who, a lady who was an archaeologist from this area, and she actually told us, oh, well, I'm actually interested in Noah's Ark and doing research, and she's finishing her degree on the topic. And so she's a key partner in this. And so, the biggest challenge was finding the right individuals to work with, because obviously as a foreigner, you just can't go into another country and start your own excavation.
Right.
And so this is their country and their land. And rightly so, they're the trained professionals who will be doing the work. But we had to find those people who are interested. So.
And what are some of the highlights?
I think a couple of things. One, just having the doors open. I'm a believer, so when you see something happen that you didn't expect, I believe it's a divine appointment. And so I've been out here, like one time we came out here and a Turkish reporter just happened to be up here at the same time. And she started asking me questions like, well, what are you guys doing? And we explained our interest in the Ark, and she wrote up a whole story about it in the Turkish press. And so it got the word out to the Turkish audience. And her team included a drone operator. And you have to get special permits to fly a drone out here, which we have now. But back then we did not. And so we've never flown a drone up to that time. But she said, well, why don't you use our permit to fly your drone? So it was the very first time we flew the drone. And to me, that was special. I love doing that. And so we flew my drone over the Ark and around the area. And then we shared the footage with her news team. And so just having those key moments where the doors keep opening, to me, those are just, showing where God is leading in a project and gives you more faith and builds up your confidence in what you're doing. And so those memories I'll cherish.
And what would this mean if the results come back and yes, it is Noah's Ark, what would that mean for the Christian community, for the community at large?
Well, as a believer, by faith, I already know the story is true. I believe there was a worldwide flood, and that Noah's Ark existed, and God saved 8 souls, and they landed in the mountains of Ararat. But to find physical proof of a story that happened so long ago, the story that you hear as a child, you read in children's books, maybe you've seen a Hollywood movie about it, something that seems so spectacular, like a global flood. And so when you find something like that, that could prove something, a key event in the Bible, not only does it strengthen your faith, but it helps those who have doubts. And so obviously there are people out there who need extra evidence, physical evidence, like doubting Thomas, when he needed to see the proof that Christ was resurrected, that the nail prints in his hands and the where the spear went into Christ's side. He needed to see that, and so God gave him that proof because he requested it to build up his faith. And I know there are people out there who are not Christians, who are or not even of any faith. And so something like this, I believe, would be key in helping them understand who God is, showing the reality and historical accuracy of the Bible. And also that there is, the story of the flood is a story of salvation. Those who did not make it on the ark, who did not believe by faith to go into the ark, were not saved. So there was a judgment aspect. And then those who believed by faith to listen to God's word, he said, build this boat, get on the ark, they were saved. And so I think that something that is a message that people will listen to today.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about the core drilling. When do you expect that to be done? What timeline are we looking at?
Well, so radar is what's so the geophysical surveys, which are non-destructive survey type equipment. So you're looking at radar, ERT, 3D seismic. So these are different technologies that can peer below the soil. That's what they're working on finishing this year, or I should say starting. So like GPR will be starting this month. And then whether, depending on the weather, they continue, if they can continue or not into the rest of the geophysical surveys. But once that is completed, that first phase of the geophysical surveys, then they'll do the core drilling. So that could be this year, depending on the weather, or it could be next spring. They do get harsh winters out here. So we are, obviously with snow on the ground, they couldn't do anything. So we do have another couple months before you get, snow here. So we'll just see what happens.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to showing our readers Noah's Ark.
Well, we'll keep you guys updated. As soon as we have more to share, I'll let you know so you can share with your readers.
Fantastic. Thank you.